There aren't many Formula 1 cars that are quite as iconic and dominant as the McLaren MP44. In the hands of arguably the greatest driver pairing of all time in Prost and Senna, the MP44 dominated the 1988 season to a level only beaten recently by the RB19, winning 15 out of 16 Grand Prix and leading all but 28 laps. But what made it so much quicker than the rest? 1988 would see McLaren switch from the tag-badged Porsche engines to the class of the field Honda engines. 1988 would also see the final year of the turbo engines in Formula 1. There were also concerns after the FIA introduced a fuel regulation for the turbo-powered cars of 150 litres for a race distance from the previous 195 litres. This meant that Honda's engine management team had to work feverishly on the fuel consumption to minimize losses. But with just 4 months left to the first race of the season, the MP44 did not exist. And not just as a car, it didn't exist as a finished drawing either. The MP44's design would be led by Gordon Murray, who joined in '87, and Steve Nichols. Murray's influence was clear to see with the MP44 by using a low-line design with reclined seats borrowed from his previous work at Brabham, and with the new regulations requiring drivers' feet to be behind the front axle and a reduction in the size of the fuel tank, meant that McLaren would be able to push the concept further than before. But this extreme concept meant that there were some issues with installing the Honda engine. The Honda engine featured a low crankshaft, and with such a low crankshaft, some lateral thinking was required when it came to the McLaren's gearbox design. They decided upon a unique triple shaft arrangement that would allow them to keep the engine as low as possible and not adversely affect the drive shaft. All of these changes meant that the McLaren MP44 would benefit from a much lower center of gravity, giving the car better stability. In addition, the MP44's smaller profile compared to its predecessor, the MP43 reduced the frontal area by 10%, lowering the drag generated and allowed cleaner airflow to the rear of the car. All of the development work that was done in such a short amount of time was nothing short of remarkable. After months of frantic development, the MP44 would finally hit the track at Imola for a shakedown. And to the delight of the team, the car performed superbly, with lap times getting quicker and quicker throughout the day. This would mark the beginning of one of the most dominant seasons Formula 1 has ever seen. The McLaren MP44 would arrive in Brazil and instantly become the marker for the rest of the grid to catch, with Senna putting it on pole in his first weekend for McLaren. Although bad luck would strike for Senna when his gearbox got stuck in first, and he would later be disqualified for changing to the spare car too late. Prost would win by 10 seconds, but had over a minute to third place Piquet. The second race in Imola would arguably be one of the single most dominant weekends from a team. Both MP44s would qualify over 2.5 seconds ahead of the next car. While other teams did well to get into the 130s, the McLarens were in the 127s, a massive difference in pace. In the race, both cars would absolutely decimate the entire field and lap every other car on the grid, and that form would continue for the rest of the 1988 season. If it wasn't for Prost suffering a mechanical issue and Senna colliding with a backmarker during the Italian Grand Prix, then the MP44 would surely have won every single Grand Prix in the season. The MP44 would give McLaren 15 out of 16 wins, and they would score 3 times more points than the next constructor. The McLaren MP44 didn't have any single magic bullet. It just had everything working perfectly together to give them a near-perfect Formula 1 car. The combination of the new engine regulation, Honda's tireless work on their famed engine, and the technical brilliance of all the people at McLaren to put this masterpiece together. The MP44 will forever be one of the iconic cars for decades to come.